who will make it to the college football playoffs. Now, I think a lot has happened. The Shoegate has happened in the SEC.
Yeah.
By the way, I mean, man, what a dumb play from a player to chuck a shoe 20 yards down the field. What's a great call. Reminded me of the old Ron Cherry day of the, giving him the business.
Yeah.
Number 72, giving him the business. And he kind of did that. I don't know what that was, Ron, but glad you're enjoying your retirement. But also this one was number 4 throws opponent's shoe 20 yards downfield, personal foul. That would have been great. I did some PA announcing for Wade Hampton. If that would have happened in high school, that would have been great for me to say over the intercom there. Just something funny like that, because I don't know if I could hold it together. But that ruined, well, you can't say that was the only reason, but that was a pretty doggone big reason that LSU ended up winning that game, because they were able to keep possession of the ball, keep going down the field, and then kick a 57-yard field goal in Gainesville in fog.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like the perfect storm. But, so Florida now is 9-2. They've lost that game. They've, to me, kind of going to drop it down a little bit, obviously, after that, because LSU's a garbage team. And lost at home. So, Walt came out today and said that he thinks that not only did Florida lose their shot of getting into the playoffs, but also lost their Heisman Trophy shot as well. Would you agree or disagree with that?
I don't know that I would full on agree with that. I mean, Trask's stats are still through the roof. It's just the Heisman has been, become such this ridiculous award, because nobody knows what the criteria is for what they're choosing. Is it the best stats? Is it the best player? Is it the best player on the best team? What is it? Nobody really knows. Is it the guy everybody thought was going to be the best at the beginning of the year? It's just, we're not really sure of the criteria. But right now, as far as stats and on paper, sometimes, in a crazy world when you really don't know what's going on, maybe you look to the paper. And Trask has some incredible stats there. Heck, maybe because of all the craziness, they don't look at the paper as much this year, which would benefit Trevor Lawrence. Maybe get him back in the race a little bit, if he has a big game against Notre Dame. I certainly hope so, as all Clemson fans do. So it's just kind of interesting to see what's going to happen there with the Heisman. So it's going to be fun. It'd be nice for Clemson to finally win their first one. If they're going to do it, this year may be it. Maybe all the craziness helps us out.
Now, I mean, going back to the playoff.
Mm-hmm.
So we were talking about this before the show. Florida, you're thinking that Florida still has a chance to redeem themselves and totally redeem yourself. And when I was looking at the matchup between Alabama and Florida, you already want to say Alabama's going to win because they're Alabama. They're going to win.
Yeah.
They're better. Well, on paper, anything can happen, and the LSU game was kind of, it is what it is, right? But, anything can happen in college football. They still do have to play in the SEC championship game. And so Alabama, Florida still have to play each other this weekend. Now, what are the chances that Florida really can beat Alabama this weekend? I don't know, but if they did, that would really upend everything. That would actually cause Alabama to have one loss and Florida to be, at that point, have beaten the number one team in the nation. And you would say if, there's no way they could keep out a SEC champion. But to me, because they lost to LSU and Texas A&M, I would say keep Alabama in because I still don't trust Florida. But, that would be me. But I think at that point, you're right. Florida would have to go in as an SEC champion, even at 2-loss. But then Alabama wouldn't not get knocked out. Mm-hmm. That would really mess up Ohio State. That would mess up maybe even Notre Dame at that point. So run that through me. Run that by me.
Yeah, I think the most likely scenario, and again, this is what we were talking about before, the teams we think are going to make the playoffs, and I think it's going to be Alabama, Clemson, Notre Dame, and Ohio State. And I think that's pretty much, honestly, I think that's pretty much status quo across the board. I think that's what most people think. Now, the question becomes, if Florida were to pull the upset against Alabama, what happens? Because they have two losses. One's a bad loss to a terrible LSU team, but
Mm-hmm.
how do you leave out the SEC champion? We all know, I mean, right? The football gods have chosen the SEC as the conference, right? So at least that's what ESPN wants you to think. So I just don't think they can leave out a two-loss SEC champion. And when I say I don't think they can or should, I hope they do. Personally, I hope they stick it to the SEC champion if it's two-loss. That's great. I just don't see them doing that. And you can't leave Alabama out because they lost to a good Florida team. That's their only loss of the year. That would be tough. I really think the odd man out in that scenario is either, assuming Clemson beats Notre Dame, is going to be Notre Dame or Ohio State. Ohio State is I'd lean to Ohio State being the odd man out in that scenario, unless Clemson really woodsheds Notre Dame. Because if they take it to Notre Dame, they're going to jump Ohio State to fourth and Notre Dame out because what they're going to do is take into account all the players Clemson had out versus Notre Dame the first time. And they would
Mm-hmm.
basically count that as Notre Dame's second loss. Like they
Right.
would have beaten them the first time, and then Ohio State's going to get in. So it all depends on how close that Clemson Notre Dame is, if that's the case, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think if it's a blowout against Notre Dame with the players back,
Mm-hmm.
that really that would probably kick Notre Dame all the way out. If it was a
Good.
complete blowout,
Yep.
so Notre Dame needs to make sure that they don't have a blowout. Now, Mitch getting in saying Alabama should opt out of the game, and Mark Childress talked about this with he and I and Walt talked about this on Friday about how you could really screw everything up by opting out. But at that point, if you start doing that on purpose, let's just say wink
Mm-hmm.
wink hint hint, you've really ruined all of college football. You've ruined everything that has come to pass for years, and really specifically this year, and all the blood, sweat, and tears that these players have gone through, and the risk that
Yeah.
your players have gone through by then trying to game the system. And it even goes back to, well, Clemson should play Notre Dame a third time if they lose a close one and not play Ohio State because Clemson shouldn't be forced to play Ohio State. I used to say that, but I would say now, bring on Ohio State. I don't like this idea that Clemson is afraid of Ohio State because Dabo Swinney is complaining about Ohio State being jumped
Yeah.
over Florida and Texas A&M. It is the truth. Playing 6 games is not fair compared to teams that play 11 or 10.
Right.
It's not fair. And it shouldn't be fair. And you should be penalized because you started late on purpose. Now, again, it wasn't Ohio State's fault. Ohio State and their friends and family actually did want to play.
Yep.
They begged to play. They said they were ready. Michigan even said, hey, we're going to continue to practice because we still believe that we're going to play. And this was early. And that was a big mistake from Kevin Warren. But I will say this. You still need to be penalized for that, just failure of leadership. And
Right.
so, should they have to play Clemson? I wouldn't want them to play Clemson just because I don't think they should be in the playoffs, really, to be honest with you. Now there are some out there that have them barely even in the top 10, and I think that's really more fair, to be honest with you. They haven't played any better teams than, say, Coastal Carolina, to be honest. Coastal Carolina has more ranked wins really than Clemson too, but really
Yeah.
they have more wins than better wins than, say, Ohio State, really, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and Texas A&M and Florida really kind of do too. So, but the SEC is also down. It is a very crazy season for sure, especially
Yeah.
when you're comparing teams that don't play each other. And so the fact that there's not an out of conference slot or schedule at all has really screwed things up. But here's some of my notes from Florida, Alabama. So Florida is number 1 in the SEC in sacks. Both teams have good offensive lines. Both teams are good on third down against opponent third downs, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But Alabama has a little bit better of stopping teams from converting first downs, and Alabama has one of the best red zone defenses in the nation. And so I think Alabama will win because I think it's going to be high scoring, but I think that it'll be an issue with that red zone. And then it didn't look like, and I don't know, you can correct me. You might know, but it didn't look like that Kyle Pitts was on the field for
He was.
LSU. So if he's not on the
Perfect.
field, so is he going to be on the field for the SEC championship game?
That I don't
You
know.
know, and we talked about how Kyle Pitts was really maybe the star of Florida.
Oh yeah.
And so maybe it wasn't so much Kyle Trask. Same thing with Devonta Smith. Maybe it's not so much Mac Jones. Now people are starting to see, wait a minute. Mac Jones is just throwing to Devonta Smith every single time.
Yeah.
So
Might want to cover him.
yeah, and maybe he needs to be the Heisman instead of the person throwing the ball.
Yep.
But yeah, so for me, I still, as much as we want to go down that rabbit hole, I still have Alabama 1.
Sure.
Okay. I still have Clemson 2 because I do think Clemson's going to beat Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, I have Ohio State easily beating Northwestern. I mean, come on. However, I don't want Ohio State in the top 4. I want them to be penalized because of lack of leadership in the Big Ten. But it's hard to argue when you have 100 points more scored for you when you're Ohio State than anybody else in the Big Ten. So they are the best by far Big Ten team. So it's hard to ignore that. And some people are saying, what about a undefeated Pac-12 team? Oh, come on. The Pac-12 is not even in the conversation.
I don't think that's happening. Yeah.
Not even in the conversation. So let's just scratch that. But Ohio State, and the Big 12 too, not in the conversation. Ohio State, I think, based on what we saw last year, and that's the problem, is that you're taking last year into account, and they've lost a lot on defense. That's the problem too. But Ohio State, I think, will get above Notre Dame and Texas A&M,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's really how it's going to work out. Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Notre Dame, 4th.
Yep.
So I think Alabama's going to play Notre Dame. I don't think they're going to put Clemson, Notre Dame again for a third time, especially a back-to-back game. That wouldn't make any sense. That would probably hurt college football ratings and credibility as a nation. So, although I do think Texas A&M is a really good all-around team, they lost the only game that mattered. Now, here's something that I didn't bring up to Walt. What if Texas A&M had won the Alabama game, and Alabama was the one-loss team? Would we be saying that Ohio State with 6 games would go ahead of a 9-1 Alabama team that didn't go to the SEC? I think not. I think that people would say, well, we can't leave Alabama out of this. But because it was Texas A&M and because they got beat by 20-something points,
Yeah.
it hurt them really bad. If it was a close game, maybe better. But I think Alabama, if they were that one-loss team, we'd be stressing out a lot more. And so what do you think about that?
No, I think you're right on with everything you said. I'm sitting here listening to you talk, like, all right, what do I need to add? There's nothing to add. I mean, that nails it on the head to me. It's Alabama 1, Clemson 2, Ohio State 3, Notre Dame 4, and I think the same thing with Alabama. If they were one loss, they'd be screaming for them to get in for sure. So I agree 100%.
And that's the thing I mentioned to Walt on Friday when Central Florida came out. When they were undefeated, they were griping up a storm about being left out.
Mm-hmm.
You don't hear that from Cincinnati. You don't really hear that from Coastal Carolina, even though I think they both have good cases. You don't really hear any griping from Texas A&M. So where is the outrage? And my thing is, the fact that there is none probably concedes the fact that Ohio State maybe should be in there.
Yeah, and I think they're going to be. I don't see Northwestern doing anything there. I don't think anybody does really, if we're just being honest. But I mean, at the other side of the coin, I haven't been super impressed with what I've seen from Ohio State this year. Their defense looks like it's trash. And I mean, we were expecting a dominant team. That like last season, we were all worried about the defense and Chase Young and everybody they had. They lost a lot. They lost a lot from that team. Their defense has not looked good. They've not played a really good team. I mean, if you want to argue Indiana, that's fine. But they haven't played a really good team in my eyes. Nobody, close to the caliber of these top 4 teams right now, or the teams at the top, I guess I should say. So I think we're really going to see what Ohio State's made of in the first round with whoever they play. To be honest with you, I don't really care if it's Alabama, Clemson, or Ohio State. I don't think it really matters. I think we're going to really see what the Buckeyes have. And I don't
Chat
think it's enough.
Chat gets in, says Pitts will be back. Casey, thank you for this.
Yep.
Seldom used reserve. Go check those guys out. Was held out of the game because they were supposed to win by 100. Huge mistake by Mullen. Well, by the way, Dan Mullen is a moron. He came out and said that it was a football play, that throwing the shoe was a football play to him, and it shouldn't have been penalized. That's what you call not taking accountability for your team. It would never happen on Clemson. Let me tell you something. Dabo Swinney would have chewed that player out so bad that the national media would have said, Dabo's too hard on his players.
Yeah.
Look at Dabo yelling at these young men. They just came out with a Disney movie named Safety that's uplifting, and here he is yelling at a young kid like that. How dare Dabo do that? How dare he? He should be removed. That's what they would say about Dabo. But Dan Mullen gets to come out and act like an idiot and say it was a football move. It was a good decision. He didn't say that, but I mean, when you say that, you're basically writing it off as it wasn't a bad decision. And it was a bad decision. The minute I saw it, I'm like, I'm sitting here doing my homework, and I'm looking over, and I'm like, this idiot just threw this ball, this shoe that wasn't his shoe 20 yards down the field. Now, Al, everybody should get penalized in this situation because let me tell you about a situation. So, back in the day, I was playing soccer against Easley High School, okay? And I had already missed one shot off the crossbar, okay? And it was a 0-0 game going late into the game. We had two shots that were just barely outside that were called back because of offsides. The referee kept calling offsides on us. And I got open, I got the ball, I kicked it, it went over too high, but guess what? I was called again offsides, okay? The ball bounced off the fence, came back to me. I turned around and kicked it like 40 yards down the field out of just frustration. Guess what I got? I got a red card. Okay, I was taken out of the game immediately. Now I could talk about many other encounters that I've had with referees over the years, but that would be for another show. But what I will say is that even I, deep down inside, knew I had did that out of frustration. Now this guy did it not out of frustration, but I mean it seemed like just out of joy, which is still kind of weird. Like you tackled him, you made a huge tackle, you want to chuck his shoe down the field. I don't get it. But it was a dumb mistake, and he messed up. But I think Dan Mullen needs to step up for his team and actually take some accountability. And maybe that's why they'll never be where Clemson's at. Bill gets in and says Ohio State won't say it, but deep down inside, they don't want to play Clemson. The Nuts always lose to Clemson. I can't believe I just repeated that. But the Nuts don't like Clemson. Well, I will say this. That's not what the national media is saying. The national media is saying Dabo Swinney is griping about, Florida and Texas A&M should be mad that a 6-win team is ahead of them, and they played 9-10 games. And, the media is saying, well, this is Dabo scared of Ohio State. I mean, I agree with Bill in the sense that how could I shouldn't read the comments.
Bill.
I shouldn't read the comments.
Bill,
but
stop reading Bill's comment and do the show.
Ohio State. I mean, why should Clemson be afraid of Ohio State? Is it because what we admitted to before that we did feel it felt like Ohio State was the better team that lost late? Is that why we should be scared of Ohio State? Because I think historically, I mean, in the record books, I mean, Clemson has never lost to Ohio State.
Yeah. Look, hey, I just saw this. I'm sorry. I saw this comment come across the line. Okay. Dean Cox, Clemson royalty, gets in and says, I need tickets. Since when does Dean need tickets? Okay. If anybody can get tickets, it ought to be Dean Cox, right? What are we supposed to do if Dean can't get tickets? I'm not really sure.
That is true, Dean. You're going to have to explain yourself a little bit more in the chat on that one because, I'm surprised you don't already have the RV backed up into a parking spot up there.
Seriously, I was waiting on a ride.
I mean, Morgan acting like he was a Sarah Fuller of Westside High School. She's way better than me. Let me just put it that way. But it was, you know what? It was historic in my own world. I was a Heisman in my own right, in my own dreams. But Um, yeah, I don't see. I mean, do you think it's warranted for people to say that Clemson is afraid of Ohio State?
No, not at all. Clemson's never been afraid of Ohio State. I don't think they will ever be afraid of Ohio State. Clemson's not afraid of anybody. Not to say they can't lose. I mean, like you said, I think Ohio State played like the better team last year. I really do. And it was a tough game all the way around. People want to point to the Justin Ross call fumble. Was it not a fumble? Goodness gracious, that was a fiasco if I've ever seen one. But it's not about being afraid. Clemson is the elite. Ohio State is the elite. Alabama is the elite. They're not afraid of anybody. They will play anybody on any given night. As a matter of fact, I think they like the competition. I think it's a thing that Dabo thrives off of. And you're not always going to win them. We saw that with LSU last year. But no, being scared of somebody, no, absolutely not. Ohio State, a team that you beat handily. No, that's not a thing. I'm sorry. We beat them handily in the past. What was it, 31-0, not that long ago. And then I get it. We squeaked by them last year, but still, get the W, and that's all that matters is the win column.
I mean, you can be chapped when you lose every game you play. I mean, come on,
bummer.
we can't say we empathize because we are not in that situation. So, I mean, but